The difference between ground up thinking, objectivity, and creative minds is so different from what's been typically called normal. Analytical thinkers learn by memorizing facts in words, and these words can be totally absent any experiential continuity or connection. How many people in modern educational environments are learning with flashcards? Are simply trying to memorize to regurgitate, paraphrase, reproduce, take multiple choice questions. And if you took a look at somebody with a PhD in psychology who has demonstrated competency on reproducing the ideas of modern psychological knowledge, how would you compare that to the minds that, without any prerequisite knowledge, using their creative mind, visualized how to explain the very structures and dynamics of the mind itself, that would invent models for understanding childhood development and correlate that to behaviors, to emotional experiences, to the formation of reality and the interpretation that would, become the basis of how somebody experiences life. And so these two worlds are so far apart that it leads to profound arguments, disagreements, because you see, the objective mind doesn't have an ego attachment, but is often under attack and assault. Because you see, when you start to share ideas from a creative point of view, you will be bringing things into existence in the same way that people in the past have created knowledge. And people will not understand that people conventionally educated will form a final level of attachment to what it is that they believe they know. And those memorized factoids diminish powerfully. That you can go and get, a good grade on a test and then feel relieved that you retained enough information through studying your flashcards over and over and over. But you see, studying flashcards is simply because you lack the experiential component, that it is not actually being assimilated into your reality. That studying and learning this way is like downloading something and putting it on a file folder on the desktop of a computer to be looked at and discussed. But if that was a piece of software that could affect the performance of the computer, it doesn't even make it into the right domain. That the human mind and its power to imagine and understand the world was the way it evolved. And so analytical thinking is a very secondary process, often absent any visual component. And so knowledge acquired this way is good for ruminating and talking and labeling things, but lacks substantial levels of depth. That it doesn't result in epiphanies, it doesn't result in behavioral changes for the person learning that information, that it simply is label making. That you can call someone a narcissist, you could say you have cognitive dissonance, you could talk about trauma bonds, and you're taking the same experience, you're taking the same way of viewing that person and just labeling it. That it actually makes no difference. That if you were to learn all the psychological knowledge in this domain of analytical thinking and memorizing, you could pass a Jeopardy test, or you could ruminate or talk or have very nice conversations with people, but you'll end up ruminating more. That it really doesn't make very much of a difference. That there's people that'll show up asking about the new supply, but they could be doing the same thing, asking about the new girlfriend, and then calling their former boyfriend my narcissist doesn't change the fundamental relationship they have to that person. Saying the confusion is now cognitive dissonance and saying their inability to move on is a trauma bond rather than saying I still have feelings. They've simply taken the same experiential components of their worldview and just put new terms to it. And it has no power that way. It might provide relief. It might provide a sense of community. It might answer some of your ruminating questions, but people get stuck in profound victimhood as a result of simply trying to quench their thirst for understanding. And understanding has no experiential or transformative power. And for that reason, subjective fields of study like psychology that are absent science, that are absent neuroscience, that are absent, connecting neurological pathways with emotional experiences and really understanding the role of emotion, why it was evolved in the world of animals and early humans, the role of imagination, the role of language, not having a more comprehensive model of understanding the mind that takes all of these segregated fields of study into consideration and then really re examines it, makes this a subjective philosophical pursuit that is resulting in profound stigmatization, totally ineffective modalities, where there have been profound breakthroughs for people in things like meditative enlightenment or transformational programs or modern ontological processes that free people from the constraints of the past without even really considering trauma. And so, this whole model of trauma is a displacement of personal responsibility that people actually find themselves comforted to be diagnosed because everybody's walking around repeating and verbalizing the first stage of the fight or flight reaction, which is something's wrong here, and they think something's wrong is me. Something's wrong is just the initiation of an inquiry that all animals would expand their consciousness to look for that something in their environment and then get triggered into a fight or flight if they saw a fox or a rattlesnake. Well, the human mind goes within itself and goes, I see I'm not good enough. I see I'm abandoned. I see I'm broken. And so the animal fight or flight reaction is the resulting, in this whole ego. The ego is a constraint upon the human mind, a subjective reality, a pervasive experiences of abandonment, fears of failure and rejection, not belonging, not being enough, that is driving humanity off the cliff. And because most children are stuck in an ego, we think that that's normal. And the neurodivergent children that don't have so much ego do not understand the subjective worlds of people, the bullying. They don't understand the slow pace of education that has no Socratic nature to it. They don't understand this indoctrination process. They don't understand why they're always negated, why they're always treated as different, why they're bullied, why they're always wrong when they could objectively see. And they have normal emotions like empathy, and they feel heartbreak looking at the world. And they're often tremendously intellectually gifted with more intelligence, more objectivity, more creativity, and a more profound relationship to the moment that makes them highly gifted and highly susceptible to being abused and misunderstood. That psychology, in all of its knowledge, is propagating profound ignorance because the minds of people educated this way are not even free enough to even include the experiences of these people or even understand any of the realities of many disorders that they categorize and stigmatize people with. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the problem with psychology is it's not identified merely as a subjective philosophy, a bunch of information that was created by a very limited number of people and does not provide real efficacy or explain the anomaly of human existence, that what we're doing is so self-destructive, it is not even natural. That living in a world run by narcissists, antisocials, psychopaths, where people are so afflicted that the smartest and brightest people are afraid of leadership, and the grandiose narcissists don't mind indoctrinating and exploiting everybody. And so the greatest gift, the human imagination, is put on ice, is demonized, is literally part of the DSM-5 and is a mental illness. And that's the world that people like me live within. Negation, devaluation, exploitation, discard. Not like normal people pleasers, because people pleasers do the same thing too. They side with narcissists against these types like me.